As the nation grapples with the aftermath of mass shootings in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso, Texas, some solutions are finding consensus, while others are definitely not. President Trump, as well as many Republicans, are now advocating for stronger background checks for gun purchases. A bill strengthening background checks passed the House, but has been waiting for action in the Senate since February. The president also called for red flag laws, supporting legislation introduced by Senator Lindsey Graham, though the president's own son, Don Jr., pushed back on the idea, claiming a lack of due process. And then there's a ban on assault-style weapons. Gun control advocates and many Democrats are calling to reinstate the ban that was in effect from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. So far, the president and Republicans in the Senate oppose that idea. Here was the president earlier today when asked about his position on assault rifles.
Well, I can tell you that there is no political appetite for that at this moment. If you look at, you could speak, you could do your own polling, and there's no political appetite from it from the standpoint of the legislature.
Joining me now is Robin Thomas, Executive Director of the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence. Robin, thank you for joining us. I want to just start on that point. No political appetite. These are these moments in history where leadership is important. There are some things that poll well and some things that don't. But in the face of these mass killings and the ties now to white nationalism in some cases and domestic terrorism, I'm not sure political appetite should be our guiding principle.
Well, especially when we've had so many years of the NRA and the gun lobby having such a stranglehold on politicians. We've seen that politicians have not been representing the will of the American people when it comes to the need for gun safety reform. So, you know, if there's no political will, that could be because Republicans are still in the pocket of the NRA. We know that a majority of Americans support restrictions on large capacity ammunition magazines and on assault weapons, and that's a majority of both American people and gun owners. So if there's no political appetite, it's because these politicians do not yet realize that the American people aren't going to put up with this anymore. You know, in this last election cycle, we saw a complete sea change. What used to be a third rail issue is now an absolutely central issue to voters. And when we saw the last congressional election, it wasn't just that we saw a huge transition in the Congress. We also saw dozens and dozens and dozens of these candidates running on a gun safety platform and winning, even in states like Texas and Georgia, Minnesota, Colorado. So this is no longer a third rail issue. This is an issue the American people are demanding action on.
15 or 18 states have these red flag laws now. New York's one of them. Donald Trump Jr. says it goes around due process, but they actually don't. Most of these red flag laws say that if something's been adjudicated or someone has been determined to be a threat, they can be delayed in acquiring a gun or can have a gun removed.
So the way it works is very simply, it's similar to a domestic violence protection order. You can go in if somebody is showing real signs of being in a time of crisis, a danger to themselves or others. There's a temporary removal of that person's guns or an inhibition on them being able to buy guns pending a full hearing within 14 days or within 21 days.
So by definition, due process. You can't go out and take somebody's gun away without a hearing.
It's a very short period pending a full hearing. Even just to do the initial removal, there has to be credible evidence presented to a judge in order to temporarily remove those weapons. And like I said, it's a very short period with full due process. There was a lot of care taken in writing these laws to make sure it complied with
including people who want to protect their gun rights, including people who are concerned about gun violence. In some cases, these were compromise arrangements.
Absolutely. Like I said, the drafting of these laws was done very carefully to take into account due process, to take into account the Second Amendment, to ensure that this is really a crisis temporary measure when we have signs. I mean, you look at what happened in Parkland. This was a situation where there was so much evidence of the threat and risk that that individual presented to the community, but there was nothing in place to temporarily remove those guns. These laws, I get asked the question, what law would have prevented this shooting? Well, these laws can help prevent those shootings. But I want to emphasize that before we look at passing federal red flag laws or even just the incentive legislation that is, we must pass a universal background check law. Even red flag laws, or extreme risk protective order laws, we call them, they can't actually be properly implemented without universal background checks. Even if you have a restriction, if you can just go to a gun show or online and still buy a gun without a background check, those laws won't be effective.
Well, you feel this. You deal with this all the time. Do you sense there's momentum? Does the president saying that we should do this? Will that tip the balance of anything? Will it get us a vote in the United States Senate?
It should, for sure. I mean, I think right now the obstacle is Mitch McConnell. He hasn't even brought this up
Correct.
for a vote. He needs to call the Senate back in. They need to vote on this. The president is behind it. We know the American people are demanding it. Congress is behind it. And Mitch McConnell, who appears to still be in the pocket of the NRA, taking millions of dollars of contributions, refuses to call this for a vote. You know, I wonder, when 90% of Americans want this and he refuses to call it for a vote, who does he represent? Because he certainly doesn't represent the American people. He represents the will of gun manufacturers and does their bidding. And I think it's pathetic, and we're seeing the American people suffer the toll of it.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.